I want to have an unstructured talk about guilt. Guilt. I don't believe in guilt. I don't know. Everybody loves to say this with me. Yes, we don't believe in guilt, but when push comes to shove, people believe in guilt. I know this because I get feedback on the lack of guilt. And it's not that I don't take responsibility. And I believe in feelings of remorse. And I believe feeling bad when you do something wrong. When you say you don't believe in guilt, when push comes to shove, people like, well, philosophically, but you've got to feel that guilt. But I associate guilt with with a feeling that gets in a rut and wants to just keep doing it, or doesn't want to, but does the actions necessary to keep doing whatever the thing is you feel guilty about. I know it's not that simple, but that's what I associate that with. And I think there's ways to feel responsible for something, without the guilt. Also, guilt is kind of one of these emotions that wants to transport back in time, and you just wish. Yeah, no, that doesn't get it because I believe in regret. I believe it's okay to wish you could go back in time, so long as you know that you can't. You know, so long as you know that that's just so you can figure out what you've done wrong in case it happens again. That's just hypothetical. But I have things that I don't know how to phrase it, but basically that I have to feel bad about things I've done wrong that perpetuate the mistake is not all solved. It goes on. There's reason to work and solve these things. And I just don't believe in guilt. I mean, the other things just practically, when you feel guilty about something, what's the best you're gonna do? You're gonna stop that thing. And if you're just gonna stop it, you're gonna inhibit it. And it's just better to put something up in place of that. You know, it's like if somebody is indulging too much to the point in something where okay, maybe I'm addicted to this thing. If you want to get rid of that space, the first best thing you could do is put something else in the time that you're spending on that addiction, the time you're wasting. Now, if you get some positive new thing you like and it's feeding your energy and you find that you're still wanting to do the other thing, fine, that's an addiction. That could be a physical addiction. I found that out with cigarettes. You can have a physical addiction. If you can inhibit it, fine. That's last resort. Try to inhibit it. But in most cases, if you inhibit it, you leave a void that you have to fill anyway. And then you put all this energy into the inhibition. Plus, it's like don't think of an elephant. If you spend a lot of energy inhibiting yourself from your sex addiction and your alcohol addiction and your internet addiction and your food addiction and your heroin addiction, then you're going to be thinking about that. So you might be able to stop doing that, but you're ready to fall back into it because you still think a lot about it. It's in your domain. It's on your radar. It's in your orbit. So I believe in other ways. When I find, yes, sometimes I've found, oh, I am drinking a little too much. Uh, I try to fill that space with something else. And it's pretty easy in that case because I don't really have such a taste for alcohol that, it's easy to just fill it with nothing in that case, or to fill it with, consciously doing something else. It's like, Oh, I'd like to have a drink. You know what? Every time I have a drink, I'll walk to the park. Now, cigarettes are an interesting one for me because that's the first thing I've ever done that was like physically addictive, and I couldn't just like take a break when it was obviously I'd done too much. You know, if I wake up with a hangover from alcohol, there's no problem. Uh, the bigger problem with alcohol might be that you know a couple, the cocktail a day is that a light kind of alcoholism if you have a drink when you come home from work. You know, that's more of a danger to me than the alcoholism of just ruining your life because it's pretty easy. You wake up with a hangover. It's like I don't want to drink for a week. You find that you do and you have another hangover. It's easy to go, okay, listen, this is ridiculous. I'm just going to go without for a bit. Cigarettes are funny because I don't know, they just defy that. I thought mental power could do that, but cigarettes showed me there's what physical addiction can really mean. So that's an interesting thing, but still, I would say, rather than feel guilty about smoking, you got to feel good about what you're going to do instead. You know, you got to feel good about those things. Now, this isn't a video about addiction, or I could go into how that too tobacco has that a little bit outsmarted, I guess, depending on your personality. But without going into addiction, it's a good example because this is the kind of thing you can feel guilty about. Also, um, though what I was really thinking about in terms of things I could feel remorseful about is things I've done, interpersonal relationships and, not really even so much actions, but inactions. Times I saw right from wrong, and I let other people make the mistake and learn on their own, or so that's the theory goes. And now I'm at a stage in life where I'm like, maybe I should have just. Like an example I could share from professional life is like, I knew it had to happen at this one company I was at when I was in my 20s, and I was getting more and more power there and becoming a lead programmer. But sometimes I'm like, I know this had to happen, and I told people, and people are like, no, and I'm like, well, I know I'm right, but I don't really know because, I was already a skeptic, and I'm like, I don't really have the experience. It just seems like that's my guess. But whatever, let's see. And then, in the long run, turns out I was right. And I could have maybe forced that way to happen. So those are the kinds of situations. Of course, in a professional situation, there's not much of a chance of feeling of a guilt there. You might feel loss or feel bad about it for yourself or something, but since it's career, people think of it differently. But in the same situation, in a personal situation, um, you know, then you start to get it's like things you should have done um, to make a situation the way you thought it should be for your kids or for a relationship or things you think you should have done 10 years earlier. Now we're getting to things where you know where I personally face this no guilt policy. And this is very difficult. People have trouble understanding that you feel bad or either. And it's just funny because I'm the kind of person that thinks about these things that I might feel guilty about uh, over and over and over. I like just constant every day of my life. I'm thinking about all the ones that have happened so far, and I know other people don't do that because if I talk to them about it, they're like, "What do you think about that for?" Blah blah blah. So I know I'm thinking about it, but the people that advocate guilt aren't, and I just see a relationship. The guilt somehow lets them like feel guilty about that. I just can't think about it. It's almost like give yourself the burden of guilt until it exhausts you, and then you don't have to think about it at all anymore because you're like, "Geez, I can't think about that. It makes me feel too guilty." But if you just think, "Well, I don't feel guilty, but geez, I could have done that different," then it may never stop. You just turn it over in your head forever. Maybe that's my situation right there.